All right, back at it. So we've determined we're gonna do a Christmas music, non-musical, small cast. Are we gonna do a period piece, like I said, Importance of Being Earnest? Not that that's a Christmas show, but it could be done any time of the year. Would that be a good show to do or not do?
Gonna be more expensive wardrobe-wise.
As far as wardrobe and set-wise, it would cost more money. Set depends, but if you're gonna try to be intricate and make it look like that Victorian area or whatever, then yes, it's gonna cost more. If you're gonna use the costumes like they would use for that time period, that could be more costly. What if we did something more modern day, normal, regular, everyday kind of people? Would that help?
You ever see a low-budget film called Santa Claus's Summer Home?
No. I
Yeah.
try to avoid those kind of things.
It's a really bad film.
That's
But
why I try to avoid it.
it's technically considered a holiday film because, well, it's,
Santa Claus, yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So you could probably produce that, and all you really need is just.
I don't want to if it's a really bad film.
I mean, it's iconic for being awful.
But that's not what we want to be iconically known for. I mean, it's one thing if that's what you want to be known for, but if you're trying to get an audience, you don't want to do things like that. Even though something like Sharknado had a lot of people watch it, it was
Man,
stupid.
it sucked.
Not that we could do Sharknado on stage very easily, but
They did 6 films.
yeah, because people sat there and watched them.
Because all the.
Because
a
people
lot of
sat there and watched
celebrities
them.
was in there.
Well, okay.
Shockingly, a lot of celebrities were in there.
So Sharknado was produced by the Global Asylum Film, who are notorious for their mockbuster films. They've been doing it since 2001, which they end up losing some rights to Screen Gems Media in the earlier stages. They got gypped, long story short. But the reason why Sharknado was such a success was not just because people were watching it, it's because the way that they marketed it, they knew that it was going to be a bad idea. So their whole marketing campaign was, hey, you want to waste an hour and a half of your life for something that could be potentially funny and just off the wall, here you go. Most people are going to line up for that because we live in an age where we've pretty much seen everything, but you've never seen a tornado with sharks in it. And that was the marketing campaign.
Excuse me.
Honestly, it's beautiful. And who else is gonna, who even enjoys such low budget stuff is gonna pass up a chance to see Tara Reid with a chainsaw for a hand like in The Evil Dead?
6 times?
Well, okay. Okay. After the 4th time, I can say yeah, they're
Yes.
pushing it. But if you're gonna keep
No,
producing
I mean,
this, it's gonna keep.
that's
making
not,
money. Why
that's not a
make another?
problem. That's okay. And again, as a theater company, that may be something we decide to do. But your chances of succeeding on stage with a bad movie idea are slim. Now, if we were going to take that bad movie and tell them we're going to do a better job of it, then there might be some people, especially if it's a well-known thing, not that the Santa Claus rental house is probably well-known because I didn't know it, but something like Sharknado, if we could do that on stage, if it's such a well-known thing, we might be able to put it on stage and make it work.
You could make it better.
Rocky Horror Picture Show is not a great movie, not a great play,
Yeah, it was.
but people love it.
It's fun.
It's a terrible show, but people love it. The music's okay. Some of the songs are great, and what they are, but it's something that people enjoy. So that's why that works.
It started because people were like making fun of the movie in the theaters, right?
No, they weren't making fun of it. They were in a way they were kind of making fun. But they were saying it was so cheesy anybody could remember the dialogue, so they'd get up and do the dialogue with it.
Yeah.
And then that became a kind of a cult phenomenon of its own. But now, I mean, like when they do it live at the theater, they don't do it with the audience participation like that per se. But there are movie theaters that play that movie for that purpose.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, it's so cheesy and bad that people love it.
You know what's funny? There's actually a spin-off to Sharknado called La Vantula, and in the movie itself, there's a crossover where the guy from Sharknado meets the guy who's trying to kill all these gigantic like spiders that are coming out of like lava pits and stuff on the ground, and he's like, "Oh, crazy seeing you here, but you have to excuse me. I got some sharks to kill," and then they split ways, and it's like a big slap in the face, but yet it's funny at the same time. And
Yeah,
it's
but
stuff like that.
but that kind of thing, that people like those kind of tie-ins like that. But yeah, that's, yeah. I mean, you could take any movie that's got a big following and put it on stage. The problem is you gotta figure out how to get some of that element on stage that you can't do. You're not gonna do a car chase on stage, not in the same way.
Are you talking about like Fast and Furious or something?
Fast and Furious is not gonna happen on stage.
Exactly.
The speed, some of that could be done on stage, some of it you don't. Now, Speed could be done as a play. That's the one with the bus, right?
With Keanu and
Yeah.
Sandra Bullock?
That old lady
Because
falls
all you
down.
need is the interior of a bus
That's
for
what-
the
yeah,
set.
that's
And then you have a video screen showing the bus moving fast through the streets.
I don't think I'd pay to see that because at the end of the day, you're still just sitting in a stationary bus, like, oh my god, we can't stop. Like, I mean,
Yeah, for the drama.
it's like,
It's the drama part of it though.
yeah,
But
it just
obviously
takes
you would
away.
have to do some things with the staging, get people up and down and things like that. But yes, they're on a bus.
You have to get some really good.
Hey, I'll tell you what, I can show you a video of one that's done, the entire play takes place in the back of a moving van kind of thing.
Okay.
It's called,
I mean, that's not me trying to knock it. I don't see it.
it can happen. It's all about the drama of it. If it's staged right,
Mhm.
it would work.
Was it the Gilbert that did their version of Evil Dead, or was that another place here in Fayetteville? There was
I know.
a theater that had done their own production of Evil Dead for the first time ever as a
Not,
play.
not here in Fayetteville.
Not here in Fayetteville. There's
Not
somewhere.
there.
I've seen somebody.
Gilbert has done their version of
I'm pretty
Rocky
sure.
Horror Picture Show.
I'm pretty sure it's Gilbert because I went there when they were doing like those like in-person classes right before COVID hit, like with the singing lessons and everything like that. I'm pretty sure it was Gilbert because it was on the wall with a list of other
You
plays,
know,
and there's a guy standing there.
I've not heard about it here either.
Well, I mean, if I'm wrong, it's a theater here. They did it a few years ago. I didn't see it.
There's only two
Huh.
theaters here. Three if you count with the
I
Sweet
know
Tea.
I know I'm not making that up. Hold on.
You may have been making it up. If it's been done here, I'm not aware of it.
Well, there is a musical adaptation of it that came out in 2003. So, just decent amount of places to try to
Well,
find it.
I'm not saying he's wrong, I'm just saying I don't know of it here in town.
Yep, Gilbert Theater, Evil Dead the Musical, Facebook, September 19th, 2017, on my birthday 3 years ago.
Nobody else liked it apparently.
Well, from what I understand, they got an award.
That doesn't mean that people didn't
I
like
don't
it.
know.
You can win an award for shows people don't like.
Yeah, it continued on until the 22nd of September. It was a 3-day event, and
3 days, that's why I didn't know about it, because it only happened.
5 college students spend the weekend in a van and
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah. But to my understanding, it was actually pretty good. Like they made a decent.
It may
for
be, I don't know. I didn't see it, so I don't know. I don't even remember hearing about it. I'm sure I did, I just don't. I don't say, oh, Evil Dead, I gotta go see that play. You know what I mean?
Like horrors.
Anyway. So, if we're gonna do a non-musical comedy set in modern times, that's gonna help us with budget. Because if it's modern day, everyday kind of people, then more or less our costumes are pretty much everyday kind of clothes. Now, obviously, as we mentioned before, we don't wanna wear things like a Marvel t-shirt because that's got copyright issues that you have to deal with. But for the most part, you're gonna have just that kind of thing. Now, what about things like Pepsi or Coke? Is that okay on stage?
Well, if you flip the logo for Pepsi upside down, it says "is dead," so there's always that.
Yeah, the audience can't read that, so.
Just take it off.
Most of the time, what you're gonna see in theaters is that they don't show the product. I'll show you a drink, but it's gonna be in a glass, not in a bottle, like that. Or it's a liquor or wine bottle that's unidentifiable, the brand. Because again, unless they're paying us for this, why would we want to advertise them? You know what I'm saying? And on film, if you see a Coke product on film, chances are Coke was involved in the process of it. Does that make sense?
I know, like on some film productions, every once in a blue moon, you'll see a particular set, like if they're walking through like New York City, you'll see a particular part of the set just blurred out in like the most obscured way, so where you barely notice it. If you look close enough, you're like, okay, well, clearly this one didn't get past censorship. And I've always found that funny. It's like there's a reason why they do it, but
The reason is because if it's an identifiable building or vehicle or product or whatever, then they have to have permission to use
Well,
it.
yeah, no, I get that, but I'm just saying, like, if that's the case, you could just try not to get it in the shot, you know?
Except for if you're doing the Empire State Building and a crime takes place there, you kinda have to have it in the shot.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, that's, that kind of thing. And not to say the Empire State Building would be one of those that would be copyright protected per se,
Yeah, no, I
but,
know.
yeah. Again, on stage, it's not as much of a problem. On stage, you'll find that art is one of the problems. Cause certain artists, if they want you to use their product, their paintings or whatever, then that's fine. Others, if they don't want them, then that can be an issue. That's why most of the time on stage, they just throw their own painting up there real quick, or whatever. This is crazy, the copyright issues you have to deal with on certain things. Alright, so if we're doing a musical, non-musical play, modern day, how much money do you think it's gonna take us?
Is it possible to budget at 5,000?
It's possible to budget wherever we want, it's a matter of whether that money's gonna last us.
I mean, if we're gonna put 5,000 in, you'd have to expect to make that back in theory, right? Otherwise, it's considered a bust, right? So you'd have to price.
In
tickets.
theater terms, making that back would still be considered a bust.
Why is that?
You're not making money. If you break even, that's not really doing anything.
Well, yeah. So, okay, so let's say the budget's $5,000, you'd have to have at least, not just on tickets, I would assume maybe a sponsor as well, you'd have to pull back at least, you're not gonna get like 50,000 back, you know, for something that's gonna be small budgeted,
no.
right?
Well,
Depending on what you're producing, or you're saying.
you're not likely. Now, what we have to determine is, how long is this thing expected to run?
Well, most.
How many performances?
Well, most plays normally run about 2 hours at a minimum, hour.
Now,
and a
I don't
half,
mean
2 hours.
time-wise, I'm talking about how many performances.
Oh, say like a week long, maybe?
Well, how many performances in that week?
Say 3, morning, afternoon, night.
3 performances is not much for a play.
I think that's reasonable. Gives people plenty of breaks, time to eat, rehearse their lines, do their
No,
stuff.
no,
they gotta do.
you're talking about 3 performances in one day?
Oh, no, in a week. Like, set it up differently so everyone at a different time schedule within the week can have a chance to do it. Because most people can't get off Monday morning or Monday afternoon, but they can go see something Monday night. Most people,
All right.
you know,
We're gonna basically say this, Monday through Friday, from 8 in the morning till 5 PM, nothing's happening.
okay,
Cause that's the common work times.
okay.
So anything we do would have to be in the evenings or weekends. Because that's when most people are off.
Okay, fine. Airtime, 8 p.m.
8 PM is fine. Most people would start around 7. Only because, look, if we're doing a one-time show, no big deal. But if we're gonna create a season of shows, then we want to establish a start time for every show being the same, so that it's not confusing to the audience. Does that make sense? 7 PM is better start time. It still gives time for people to get off work, go eat, and come here to the show. Okay? And the reason I say 7 PM is a better start time, because 8 PM would be fine, but if we end up doing a musical, and it's a 3-hour musical, now they're getting out at 11 PM.
Nobody wants to do that, if they have work in the morning, even
Right.
kids that go into
And
school.
so, that's why 7 PM is better, because then they're out by 10. Not that we're likely to pick a 3-hour musical, but it could happen. There are some that are long. They're good shows, but they can be long. And keep in mind, your start time's at 7 PM. There could be things that postpone that start time. Whether it's issues with audience, getting in on time, box office, could be set technical things, it could be all kinds of things. Actors don't show up on time, whatever it may be. So you have to have a start time so the audience knows what to expect, as well as we know when to be there and all that. So that if something happens, we have a little bit of time without everybody being there till midnight. Right? Because even when you start the show on time, there could be things that happen that cause it to go longer than it should. Intermission. For instance, one of the problems we have in here, if we have a full audience in here, 300 people or whatever, there's only one women's bathroom right here. And there's usually a long line at intermission.
I got 2 questions for you.
Uh-huh.
One, how many people, let's say we're not using this place, but we'll use it as an example regardless, but how many people are we expecting to arrive? And on top
Well,
of that.
that's the thing that's gonna have to be determined based on different things. For instance, we now know kind of what show we're looking at, not necessarily a title, but we can assume we have one. Now we have to determine, based on what we know of the show, where are we gonna perform this?
Okay, so assuming we're using the auditorium, this place sits how many people max?
Right now, it's around 275.
Around 275, and assuming that COVID wasn't an issue, and we probably exclude maybe just a few rows for God knows whatever reason, just because of the fact that some view is messed up because of how the place is positioned, as
Yeah.
you've expressed. So we say 250 people max, that's what we're trying to shoot for. So if we're trying to get 250 people to come in here and we're working on a budget of 5,000, what would be a reasonable price for tickets to not just make that back, but also make it back in concessions as well?
Again, that's gonna be based on a lot of different things. For instance, we can hope 250 people. Chances are, because we're not established, nobody knows us, depending on the show, whether they've heard of this type of show or this name of the show, whatever, you can expect more reality is gonna be 50 to 100 people per performance.
Okay.
Okay? So there's that. So you set your box office for that purpose, but you don't want to over-ticket the box office. For instance, if you were to go to the Gilbert Theater today to go see a show, it's gonna cost you anywhere from $8 to $20, give or take, whether it's a musical, non-musical, whatever.
Okay.
Depends on what type of show it is and the performance. Certain performances may be a little cheaper than other ones. You go to Cape Fear Regional Theater, you're looking anywhere from $10 to $30, given, again, type of show, performance, and all that stuff. So if we're expecting 50 people to 100 people, and our goal is to make money, that may mean charging 30 to 50 bucks as a projected goal to be able to make money. Does that make sense? You're not gonna sell a seat for 50 bucks here in this town very easily, right? Especially on an unheard of entity. Cape Fear Regional Theater is not gonna sell seats for 50 bucks unless it's a fundraiser night. And then it's only the ones who are true patrons Does that make sense? So, could you make it up on box office, on concessions?
I'm gonna say probably not.
Not if you're looking at 50 to 100 people, because your concessions are gonna be based on how many people are there, and then how many people are actually gonna eat or drink.
I mean, you could always do what most places do. I mean, half the time when you go to like a movie theater, God knows whatever, to watch something, you know, you got these little boxes of chocolates and stuff that you can get at a dollar store for like 99 cents versus paying the $3 for a box of M&Ms.
Right.
You know, so inflate the price to make something back.
But when you go to the movies, they make their money off of the concessions. They don't make their money off of selling tickets to the movies. That's why the concessions are so expensive, because that's where their money is.
Yeah, cause the tickets would be like.
So if you go to any movie theater in town, they don't make money off of you buying a ticket to their show. That money, most of that money goes to the production company that makes the movie.
So how exactly
What
does,
you're doing is selling concessions, and that's where they make their profit.
so how exactly does the box office work? Like what all goes into it?
For box office,
Yeah, like tickets and seeing where, like who's gonna go to the show and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I'm asking the wrong question. Simplified box office, explain that to me if you can.
well, the box office is basically who takes tickets.
Okay, do they receive a profit? Do they help?
Well, the box office is part of the theater. The theater itself is what would either make.
Well, I know like a lot of places, let's say like, what do you call it? I can't think of the place now. Crown Coliseum, right? Whenever somebody comes to the Crown Coliseum, you know, they're the ones who are responsible for making sure people get the tickets and come, right? So that they receive a profit.
You're thinking of the box office as a separate entity from the theater. It's
Is it
not.
not? Oh.
It's all part of the same thing.
Okay.
Even at the Crown Coliseum, the box office is part of the Crown Coliseum. It's not the box office's job to get the people to come. Publicity, which is another arm of that business side, that's whose job it is. But for somebody like the Crown, they are a facility, they're a venue. They hire people to work there. You renting the facility is what pays those people to work there. The box office either has one or two things that happen. So if I rented the Crown Coliseum for whatever purpose, they charge me X amount of money per day or per hour, depending on what's going on, okay? So the Crown Coliseum is roughly about $10,000 a day to rent it. So it doesn't matter what event it is, graduation, a concert, or a sporting event, whatever. Knowing that that facility, if it's used in its entirety, seats roughly about 30,000, I think it is, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty large.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea is if I'm gonna have a concert there, and it's gonna cost me $10,000 a day, I better have the right person coming that's gonna sell that box office. In other words, is gonna fill that space up. That's why somebody like J. Cole works, because he's from Fayetteville, everybody knows him, whether they like his music or not is irrelevant. They wanna know him, or they know him and they go. He could fill that space up, no problem. Somebody like Garth Brooks, it's not big enough for him, because he's a big venue kind of person. Somebody like Madonna in her heyday, she's too big for that. Today, maybe, because she hasn't really put out a lot of music lately, has she, that I know of? So she probably could fill that space up still.
I think she did a featurette, but I don't
But
know.
she hasn't done any real music in a
You know,
while.
I know, I'm just saying.
But-
in general.
But she still has a name recognition, and that makes a difference. So those kind of things, so at $10,000 a day, that's $10,000 before anything's happened. Now the box office comes in. So here's the way it works with box office for a venue like that. Either you pay this amount of money for the rental of the space and it's done, because all you're doing is really paying for the cost of running the electricity and the lights and the sound and the people operating the whole thing. Or it's $10,000 a day plus a percentage of the proceeds, box office. And the Crown gets all the concessions because that's theirs. Or they sublease it to other people, other companies to come in and do it. Does that make sense? So you're not making, as an artist, you're not making anything off concessions at those kind of things. But what they're gonna do is make money off their merchandise.
I know I'm asking like a lot of questions that I should probably already know at this point, but like I'm familiar with just pointing the camera, you know?
Right.
Me delving into.
Well, that's why we talk about these things, because all this ties together. So for us, for theater, for box office, again, most of the theaters in the United States are nonprofit organizations, because a nonprofit organization means our goal is not to make a profit. Doesn't mean we can't make a profit. It means that's not our goal. We're not here to try to make the money back. We're here to put on a product for the audience. Make sense? If we make money, great, we put that towards the next show. If we don't make any money, no big deal, because we know that we've not used our entire budget for this one show. We hope we have not used our entire budget for this one show. For us getting started, we probably are going to use most, if not the entire budget for the show, because we have nothing. But what they don't look at most of the time is, if we play our cards right and we do the right things, some of what we put into this budget for this show can be used for the next show, and we don't have to use that expense anymore. For instance, if we were going to put on a play, I don't care what play it is, there's certain things that we would want to do. So if I'm going to do a play, and this is what I'd say, we're going to use our budget for this. We're not going to pay actors, not yet. Why? There's plenty of actors in the area that will work for free, because they either enjoy it or they just want to be out in front of people. Okay? And we're talking good quality actors. We're not talking Sharknado type of things. Okay? You see what I'm saying? There are plenty of people that could do the performances. That's good. 2, we're not going to pay our crew unless we have to. In fact, the only crew person I would pay would be stage manager, only because that person has to be there all the time, period. So if we were going to pay anybody, it'd be that one. And it probably would not be a whole lot of money. It'd just be a little bit just to thank them and give them gas money or something. Okay? And again, there's a lot of people that would do it for that. So if we're not paying our cast or crew, we're already into a good start. Make sense? So what are we going to spend our money on? Well, here's the areas. You have budget for costumes, props, scenery, sound, lights, publicity. And those are the main areas we concentrate on. So where are we going to spend the most money on?
Production?
Well, all of this is production. All of this is production. Where are we going to get our most bang for our buck?
Concessions? I'm
What's
just
that?
guessing at this one.
Publicity is important. We need to spend some money on publicity, period. But if we're going to spend money on publicity, we're going to do it right. That doesn't mean go buy an ad on the local news channel. There aren't any local news channels. So that means if we were going to do an ad on local news, it'd have to be out of Raleigh, which may or may not help us, right? What about getting a billboard in town?
I mean, that's possible.
It's possible, but is it going to be much money? Because you're going to pay a lot of money. You're talking upwards to $1,000 for a limited time for something that a lot of people aren't going to see, or even if they see, they're not going to take time to read. Right? How many times do you look at billboards every day?
Honestly,
I mean, it just depends, right? most of the times we ignore them because we see, especially if you go the same route every day to work and back, or to school and back, you get, after a while, you forget. And if it changes, oh, that's new. That's about as far as it goes. So I'm not saying it's not useful, because they do have uses, but would we want to spend $1,000 on publicity for one billboard for up to a month at most, where that $1,000 could be utilized somewhere else better?
Well, I mean, Facebook and Instagram are good options, and I say that only under singular circumstances.
Those aren't just good options, those are the best options. Social media is the best place to advertise for somebody who doesn't have money.
So I have two friends in California, and they run a band called Chase the Comet, right? And they dropped in an ad for Facebook. I think they paid like $200 for the ad, right? And it went everywhere. Like it even hit Japan and everything. Right?
Yeah. The only problem with that, and that's great for them. For us, we don't need it to go to Japan. We want it to stay within our area.
Right. I mean, it's great.
Now, if we were streaming this over the internet and charging for that, pay-per-view kind of thing, then yes, we'd want it to go everywhere. But yeah, and you're right, on Facebook you can tell it where your market is, so that it's more localized as opposed to. But who in here has Facebook? 3 people. How many friends you got on Facebook?
Okay, how many actual friends do you have on Facebook?
2014.
I got 200 people, and I don't talk to like.
2014. And I know all of them.
Yeah, I mean, if you
All right, I know most of them. All right, I know half of them. Probably more than that. But keep in mind, somebody like me, I use it for this. So people that are on my friends on Facebook are already theater people, students or former students or cast members, community, whatever. So yeah, but all right, so between us there's 2,500, 3,000 people, just between 3 people. Now how many of them are local?
maybe 300 to 400.
So I'd say maybe 1,000 of mine are local.
Okay.
So that gives us, again, about 1,500 maybe. But of your 300 or 1,000 or whatever, and mine, we may have some that are the same, but it doesn't matter, because if I have 1,000 friends and you had 1,000 friends and you had 200, let's say you had 1,000 friends, even if they were the same ones, for the most part, there's still other friends of theirs that we don't have that they have. So then it branches out. So that you reach your 1,000, if you can reach all 1,000 of yours, then they can reach however many they have locally, and then it spreads globally around the area, fast. That's the beauty of social networking, is everything spreads quick. You can get the word out real fast about something.
And they have a lot of groups where you can be in on Facebook.
And there's the groups, and there's pages, and there's all those other things. So we could start a Facebook page so that people can share that and start getting our own following, so to speak. Same thing on Twitter, same thing on Instagram. Don't do TikTok, that's just stupid. I don't know. But all the social media is a good thing, because it's something that can help you out. And you don't have to pay. You could pay to advertise, but we would start out with the free stuff.
Yeah,
Just post it to friends. How many of you know friends that you have email addresses to? Send that to them, they send it to their friends with email, so on and so forth.
You know, with the whole advertisement and business tool that they have on Facebook, you can actually pay, I think it's like $1 a day.
You can do fairly cheap and get it out there,
And
yeah.
get some pretty decent advertising, which is astounding. Like I said, I mean, they were on a budget of $200, and they went all across the world with that.
Yeah.
Imagine what $20 would do, you know? And that's just within
You never
a month.
know.
What you would only need it for, if, let's say you started advertising a month before the show.
You would want to start about a month before the show.
Yeah, so
You don't want to start advertising too quick, because people forget.
Yeah.
But you don't wanna wait until 2 weeks before because people have to have time to plan it out.
Yeah.
So you definitely wanna do it about a month out.
Something like $30, that'll get you a long ways, honestly.
Yeah. Now, what about the newspapers? There's only 2 in town. That's gonna cost some money. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but who in here reads the newspapers?
I used to, mostly for the comics.
So unless we advertise in a comic, you're not gonna, you see what I'm saying? But even if we look at the newspaper, we don't always look at the ads.
Right.
Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. There are people that's the place to go with. The radio might be a better place for some because people do listen to the radio usually in the car on the way to work or home. But guess what? On your way to work, on your way home from work, or at lunchtime, the most convenient time for people to listen to radio are also the most expensive times to advertise on the radio. There's a reason for that because that makes sense. It's just like in the newspaper, you know what the most read page in the newspaper is? Page 3. There's the cover and then the first page. Same thing, most magazines, page 3 is the page. Because that's the page most people, they open it to the first page, which just happens to be 3 in the, does that make sense to everybody? So if you're gonna advertise, that's the place you'd want it, if you could. But again, those things are gonna cost a lot of money. You could also get posters printed up. You can get posters printed up fairly cheap now, or flyers, and then just start going to places and putting them up. Now, a lot of places like restaurants and stuff, you would have to get permission to put them up. But we've done things like put the little table tents that you can get printed up. You can go to a restaurant and they'll put those up for you if you ask them. We've done it at different plays, I can't remember which one we did last. We had at least 5 different restaurants that had them up in the area. And it didn't cost us anything other than the printing of it, which is fairly cheap. Now, you can't guarantee that somebody's not just gonna push it out of their way, but it is something they have to look at as they move. So, but you know. So, is this $5,000 sound like a doable deal, or do we need more money?
That seems okay.
Depends on the exact show it could be.
If everything played out right, $5,000 might be the very minimum we would need. Probably closer to 10,000 would be more ideal, because you want a little bit of give or take. But what we're going to do is we're going to spend some of that on advertising. Not necessarily a lot, but some of it.
Say 500 on advertisement, maybe at a minimum, max.
Something like
1,000.
that, maybe. Yeah, it just depends. Well, the advertisement, the good thing about that is we're going to wait until we're well into it. By then, we'll know how much we've had to spend on some of these others to know if there's a little wiggle room here to play to advertise more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We're going to say, we'll start with, say, 500 and say this is what we're going to set aside for advertising. But if there's something left over from here, we can push that towards it.
Gotcha.
Okay? We're going to spend the most money on sets and lighting and costumes. Why?
Because those are important for the story.
Not just for that reason.
Well, you need to make
Bec-
sure that people can see what's going on, they need to understand.
Well, let's look at it this way. I can either buy props and sets, or I can rent them. Which would I rather do?
Make them?
If you can make them, yes. But that'd be like buying them.
Okay, so buy 'em.
If it's just a one-time thing, pretty much.
If it's a one-time thing and we know this is a one-time thing, rent them. But if it's something that we're looking at, we're gonna have a whole season and we plan on having multiple seasons of shows, we want to buy as much as we can, but we don't want to buy everything the first show because we don't want that expense. It's gonna cost a little bit more to buy certain things than it would be to rent them. But if we bought our lighting, at least the minimum amount we need for this one little show, then the next time, if we budget to rent or whatever, we can either buy more lights or rent some, and now we've got twice as much lighting as we would have had, which means better lighting, which means better. We build some sets, pieces, flats, platforms. Those are things that we will use over and over and over and over again. That saves us money in the long run. So if we built our stage like this was not here, we built this, the entire thing. If we built this stage, guess what we have next time? The stage. That's a good $1,000, $2,000 that we don't have to spend next time. Does that make sense? So now if we had that same amount of budget for the next show, that means there's that much more we could do with it. Either buy more costumes, since we rented this time, we buy costumes. Now we're starting a costume closet. So now that, especially if we're doing something like Importance of Being Earnest, which would be better, rent those costumes or buy them?
I haven't seen it.
For us, right now, renting would be the best way to do it. But eventually it'd be nice to have some of those things in stock. Because the Importance of Being Earnest, guess what other shows you can do with those? Christmas Carol. Anything set in late 1800s, early 1900s, those costumes would work in.
So when you're talking, like your mask is like, it looks like you have a mouth there, so I keep thinking of like the Muppets. And I'm so
Yeah.
sorry, that's one snickering over here.
Note to self, Christopher F. Give him a... No, I don't want to do that to him. All right, it's about that time, so we're going to let you go.